If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more compelling narratives that explore the complexities of blended families and relationships. Now, let's dive into this emotional journey. Mark Wilson stared at the shattered remains of the model airplane scattered across the living room floor. Fragments of balsa wood, tiny plastic components, and hours of patient work with his 8-year-old son Tyler lay destroyed before him. The sound of the front door slamming still echoed through the house. "I don't have to listen to you. You're not my real dad." Mason's words hung in the air, sharper than the splinters of the broken model. Mark took a deep breath, fighting to maintain his composure as Tyler's small shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. The model had taken them 3 weekends to complete, 3 precious weekends of bonding that now lay in ruins at their feet. "It's okay, buddy," Mark said, kneeling beside Tyler and pulling him into a hug. "We can build another one." "But it won't be the same," Tyler whispered, his voice cracking. "We painted our names on the wing." Mark swallowed hard. At 42, he'd faced many challenges in life, but none quite like the past 3 years of marriage to Jessica and becoming stepfather to her teenagers, Mason and Chloe. He'd approached blending their families with optimism and patience, believing that time and consistent care would eventually bridge the gaps between them. His own children, Emma and Tyler, had adjusted relatively well to their new extended family, but Jessica's kids remained stubbornly resistant. "Dad?" Emma's tentative voice came from the doorway. At 10 years old, she had developed a sensitivity to the tension that periodically gripped their household. "Is Tyler okay?" "He'll be fine, sweetheart," Mark assured her, though uncertainty clouded his eyes. "Why don't you two go upstairs and play for a bit while I clean this up?" As the children retreated upstairs, Mark began gathering the broken pieces, each fragment a painful reminder of Mason's deliberate act of destruction. The 16-year-old had watched them build this model for weeks, had witnessed Tyler's growing excitement as it neared completion. The act wasn't random. It was calculated to hurt. The front door opened again, and Jessica appeared, arms laden with grocery bags. Her smile faded as she took in the scene. Mark on his knees collecting broken pieces, the empty display stand on the shelf, and the unmistakable heaviness in the air. "What happened?" she asked, setting the bags down. Mark stood slowly, holding a handful of wreckage. "Mason happened." "I'm sure he didn't mean to," Jessica began automatically, her voice carrying the familiar defensive tone she adopted whenever her children's behavior was questioned. Mark felt something snap inside him, not violently, but definitely. It was the quiet breaking of patience stretched beyond its limits. "He meant it, Jessica." He knocked it off the table, looked Tyler in the eye, and said I wasn't his real dad, so he didn't have to listen to me. Mark's voice remained calm despite the storm brewing inside him. "This has to stop." Jessica sank onto the couch, her shoulders slumping. "I'll talk to him when he gets back." "We've been talking for 3 years," Mark replied. "Both Mason and Chloe treat this house like a hotel with full amenities, but no rules. I pay for their phones, their streaming services, their sports equipment. I drive them to practices, help with homework, attend their school events, and they still act like I'm some intruder they have to tolerate." "They're still adjusting," Jessica defended weakly, but even she couldn't muster conviction behind the words anymore. Mark placed the broken pieces on the coffee table and sat beside his wife. "Jess, I love you. I want our family to work. But I can't keep pouring everything I have into a relationship where I'm constantly disrespected and undermined." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying something needs to change," Mark said firmly. "I've tried being patient. I've tried being the bigger person. I've tried giving them space. None of it is working." As if on cue, 14-year-old Chloe stormed into the house, tossing her backpack carelessly across the entryway. "Mom, I need $60 for the new team hoodie. Everyone's getting one tomorrow." No greeting, no acknowledgement of Mark's presence, just the demand. "Chloe, we're having an important conversation," Jessica started. Whatever. I need the money by tomorrow morning, Chloe interrupted, already heading toward the stairs. Chloe! Mark's voice stopped her. Your mother and I are talking, and we don't just hand out $60 without discussion. Chloe rolled her eyes dramatically. You're not my dad. I don't need your permission to talk to my mom about something. You're right. I'm not your biological father, Mark acknowledged, standing up, but I am the person who pays for your phone, your Netflix, your Amazon shopping sprees, your soccer equipment, and half the mortgage on this roof over your head. Chloe's eyes widened at Mark's unusual directness. And this isn't about permission, he continued. It's about basic respect, something you and Mason have yet to demonstrate in this house. That evening, dinner was a tense affair. Mason had returned home without apology or acknowledgement of what he'd done. Emma and Tyler ate quietly, sensing the undercurrent of tension. Jessica attempted strained small talk, while Chloe and Mason exchanged meaningful glances across the table. After the children had gone upstairs, Mark and Jessica sat at the kitchen table, mugs of cooling tea between them. I've been thinking all afternoon, Mark said quietly. I think Mason and Chloe need to spend some time with David. Jessica looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean they need to experience life without all the conveniences and privileges they take for granted here. David lives 20 minutes away. Let them stay with him for a week or two. They visit him every other weekend already, Jessica pointed out. That's not the same thing. Those are fun visits with minimal responsibility. I'm talking about actually living with their father. School days, homework, chores, the works. Jessica's brow furrowed. I don't know, Mark. What I do know, Mark continued, is that I've reached my limit. I can't continue like this, being treated as if I'm nothing more than an ATM and a chauffeur in my own home. Upstairs, unknown to Mark and Jessica, Mason sat at the top of the stairs, listening to every word. His face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, not yet, but perhaps the first inkling that actions might have consequences. The following morning, Mark woke early and set his plan in motion. He called a locksmith to change the exterior locks. He then contacted their cellular provider and removed Mason and Chloe from the family plan. One by one, he cancelled the streaming subscriptions that the teenagers primarily used. Finally, he went to the garage and retrieved several cardboard boxes. By the time Jessica and the children woke up, Mark had already packed most of Mason and Chloe's non-essential belongings. He'd been careful and respectful. Nothing was thrown haphazardly into boxes. Clothes were folded, electronics carefully wrapped, personal items organized thoughtfully. What's going on? Jessica asked, alarmed when she saw the boxes in the hallway. I called David this morning, Mark informed her calmly. He's expecting Mason and Chloe after school today. They'll be staying with him for a while. You did what? Jessica's voice rose. You can't just make that decision without me. I'm not sending them away permanently, Jess. This is a wake-up call for all of us. They need to understand that being part of a family means mutual respect and consideration. The commotion brought the children out of their rooms. Emma and Tyler looked confused and worried. Mason and Chloe appeared shocked, then indignant. You can't kick us out. This is our house too, Chloe protested. I'm not kicking you out, Mark explained calmly. You're going to stay with your father for a while. And yes, this is your house too, which is why I expected you to treat it, and everyone in it, with respect. David Henderson lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment across town. Unlike the spacious suburban home Mark and Jessica shared, David's place was cramped and sparsely furnished. He worked long hours as a sales representative, often leaving early and returning late. When Mason and Chloe arrived with their boxes and suitcases, David was surprised by the amount of belongings they had brought. Your mom said it would be for a week or two, he said, scratching his head as he surveyed the pile of boxes. We'll have to figure out where to put all this stuff. The spare room isn't very big. Reality began to set in as the teenagers realized they would be sharing the small second bedroom. The apartment had one bathroom, basic cable on a single television in the living room, and a kitchen barely large enough for a small table and 3 chairs. Where's the Wi-Fi password? Mason asked, already pulling out his phone. I just use my phone data, David replied. Never got around to setting up internet here since I'm not home much. The first evening was awkward, but manageable. David ordered pizza, and they watched a basketball game on TV. Mason and Chloe retreated to their shared room early, both teens hunched over their phones. It wasn't until the following morning that Mason made an unwelcome discovery. My phone isn't working, he announced at breakfast, frustration evident in his voice. It says the service has been disconnected. Chloe quickly checked her own phone, finding the same message. What's going on? David shrugged. You'll have to ask your mom about that. I can't afford to add 2 more lines to my plan right now. The reality of their situation began to sink in. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, 1 bathroom to share, a father who, while caring, wasn't particularly attentive to the details of teenage life. No streaming services, no garage full of sports equipment, no fully stocked refrigerator. I need to go back home, Chloe insisted later that day when David returned from work. I have homework that requires internet research. You can use the public library, David suggested. It's a few blocks away. They're open until 8. But my friends are all texting about the history project groups and I can't respond, Chloe protested. David looked sympathetic, but firm. Your mum and Mark were pretty clear that this arrangement is going to last at least a week. You'll have to find workarounds for now. Meanwhile, back at the house, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Though Jessica had initially been upset with Mark's unilateral decision, she couldn't deny the peaceful quality that had settled over their home. Emma and Tyler seemed more relaxed, engaging in conversation at dinner without the constant undercurrent of tension. I miss them, Jessica admitted that evening as she and Mark sat on the porch swing. But I didn't realize how much stress we were all living with until it was gone. Mark squeezed her hand. I miss aspects of them too. They're smart, talented kids, but what was happening wasn't healthy for anyone, including them. By the 3rd day at David's apartment, Mason and Chloe had grown increasingly frustrated with their circumstances. They had to walk to school instead of getting a ride. They had to use the school library to complete assignments. They couldn't participate in the group texts and social media conversations their friends were having. The spare room felt increasingly claustrophobic as they navigated around each other and their belongings. This is all Mark's fault, Chloe complained as they walked home from school. He's trying to punish us. Mason kicked a stone along the sidewalk. Yeah, but he's not even our real dad. Why do we have to listen to him? Because he pays for everything, a small voice in Mason's head replied, but he pushed it aside. That evening, while David worked late, the siblings sat in their shared room, the limitations of their new living situation weighing heavily upon them. Remember when Tyler cried about that stupid airplane? Chloe asked, lying on her back and staring at the ceiling. Yeah, Mason replied, but his voice lacked its usual bravado. The memory of Tyler's devastated face had been replaying in his mind more frequently than he cared to admit. Do you think we were too hard on Mark? Chloe's question hung in the air between them. Mason didn't answer immediately. He thought about the model airplane he'd deliberately destroyed. Not just any model, but one that Mark and Tyler had spent weekends building together. He remembered the look on Mark's face, not anger, but a deep disappointment that somehow felt worse. He does a lot for us, Mason finally admitted. More than Dad, if we're being honest. Chloe sat up. Dad tries, but he's always working, and his apartment is so small, and he doesn't know what to do with us half the time, Mason added. Mark always comes to our games and knows what's going on with school stuff. The following day marked 1 week since they'd left Mark and Jessica's house. 7 days without cell service, comfortable beds, or the conveniences they'd taken for granted. 7 days of reflecting on the family dynamic they'd left behind. When David returned from work that evening, he found Mason and Chloe waiting for him at the kitchen table. We want to go home, Mason stated simply. David didn't look surprised. To your mom's house? Yes, Chloe confirmed. We miss everyone. David studied his children for a moment. Are you sure it's not just the amenities you miss? Mason met his father's gaze. It's not just that. I think we haven't been fair to Mark. No, David agreed, you haven't. And I've probably enabled that by never insisting you show him respect. That's my failure as much as anyone's. Chloe's eyes widened at her father's candor. Mark isn't trying to replace me, David continued. He's trying to be another adult in your lives who cares about you. And from what I can see, he's doing a pretty good job of it. Certainly better than I could do with my work schedule in this apartment. Mark was working in the garden when Jessica's car pulled into the driveway. His heart quickened when he saw Mason and Chloe in the back seat, their expressions unreadable through the window. Jessica had gone to meet David and the kids for lunch, a planned check-in after a week apart, but she hadn't mentioned bringing them home. He set down his gardening tools and walked toward the car, uncertainty in each step. The teenagers emerged slowly, looking somehow different than they had a week ago. Their postures were less defiant, their expressions more thoughtful. Mark, Mason began, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat and tried again. Mark, I owe you an apology. Mark's eyebrows rose in surprise. What I did to your and Tyler's airplane was wrong, Mason continued. It was childish and mean, and I did it to hurt you both. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too, Chloe added, meeting Mark's gaze. We haven't treated you fairly. You've done a lot for us, and we've been ungrateful. Mark studied the teenagers before him, noting the sincerity in their eyes. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear. Jessica watched the exchange with tears in her eyes, hope blooming on her face. We'd like to come home, Mason said. If that's okay with you. Mark nodded slowly. It's okay with me. But things need to be different if we're going to make this work. We know, Chloe acknowledged. Dad talked to us about respect and about what family really means. And what does it mean? Mark asked gently. It's not just about being related by blood, Mason replied, the lesson clearly fresh in his mind. It's about who's there for you, who supports you and cares about what happens to you. And who builds model airplanes with you, Chloe added with a small smile. Mark felt a warmth spread through his chest. Well, there's someone who's been missing you both quite a bit, he said, gesturing toward the house where Emma stood in the doorway, watching hopefully. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, all 6 of them together again. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in months, perhaps years. There was laughter, genuine questions about each other's days, and an undercurrent of newfound appreciation. After dinner, Mason approached Mark in the kitchen. I was wondering, he began hesitantly, do you think we could try to rebuild that model airplane? With Tyler, I mean? I'd like to make it up to him. Mark smiled. I think he'd like that very much. And, Mason added, maybe you could teach me how to do some of the more detailed parts, if you want to. I'd be happy to, Mark replied, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Later that night, as the house settled into quiet, Mark and Jessica sat on their bed, reflecting on the events of the past week. I was so angry with you at first, Jessica admitted, but seeing them today, hearing them apologize without being prompted, it was worth it. Mark nodded. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about helping them understand that respect isn't conditional on biology. Family is what we build together through actions and choices. Speaking of building, Jessica said with a smile, I saw Mason looking up model airplane kits online earlier. Mark chuckled. Small steps, but in the right direction. Outside their room, unbeknownst to them, Chloe stood in the hallway, having overheard their conversation. She silently retreated to her own room, a new understanding settling in her heart. The privilege of having 2 fathers, one by birth and one by choice, was not something to reject, but something to cherish. If you enjoyed this story about family bonds, respect and personal growth, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences with blended families. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that touches hearts and minds. Thank you for listening.